The triangle trade was a complex network of trade routes that operated during the 16th and 19th centuries, involving Europe, Africa, and the Americas. It was characterized by the exchange of goods, including slaves, between those three regions. The trade got its name from the triangular shape of the routes taken by the ships involved. The trade can be broken down into three passages. The first is the Europe to Africa, also known as the outward passage. European ships, often owned by merchants or chartered by trading companies, set sail from ports in Europe, primarily from countries like Portugal, England, France, Spain, and the Netherlands. These ships carried manufactured goods that were in demand in Africa, such as textiles, firearms, gunpowder, metal tools, glass beads, and trinkets. These goods were chosen specifically for their appeal to African traders and leaders, as they would serve as commodities for exchange. European traders arrived at various points along the African coast, from west to central Africa, and established trade relations with local African rulers and merchants. They often set up fortified trading posts known as factories. These posts not only facilitated the exchange of goods, but also provided European traders with a base for negotiating for the acquisition of African slaves. Important trading partners in this area included Yoruba, Oyo, Benin, and the Congo. Next was the journey from Africa to the Americas, also known as the Middle Passage. African slaves purchased from factories were gathered at the coast and held in barracoons, or holding pens, before being loaded onto European slave ships. The Middle Passage was made up of the grueling voyage across the Atlantic Ocean, from Africa to the Americas, specifically to regions where the demand for slave labor was high, such as Portuguese Brazil, the Caribbean, and the 13 English colonies. The conditions on slave ships were unsanitary, and disease spread quickly due to the lack of proper hygiene and ventilation. Malnutrition, physical abuse, and despair were rampant, leading to high mortality rates during the voyage. Lastly was the Americas to Europe, or the Inward Passage. Upon reaching the Americas, the enslaved Africans who survived the Middle Passage were sold at slave auctions to European colonists, plantation owners, and other labor-intensive industries. The demand for slave labor was particularly high on plantations that produced cash crops like sugar, tobacco, cotton, and coffee. Conditions were often brutally harsh, especially in Portuguese Brazil, where 5 million slaves were brought across the Atlantic for work on sugar and coffee plantations. The products of this forced labor, such as the harvested crops, raw materials, and sometimes even precious metals extracted from the Americas, were loaded onto ships bound for Europe. These goods were then transported back across the Atlantic and sold in European markets, generating significant profits for traders, merchants, and colonial powers. The wealth accumulated from the exploitation of enslaved labor and the resources of the Americas played a pivotal role in financing Europe's economic growth and the expansion of the new colonial empires.